Okay, now thank you for that. So that's what a Geniza is. In my congregation in Atlanta, we actually created a Geniza in the cemetery that the synagogue owned. And when we had prayer books or other religious objects that were used beyond repair, we buried them in the cemetery in a special place. It was our Geniza. Now, the Abraham Accords were extremely important. That helped Israel establish working relationships with several key Arab countries. One of those countries is Morocco. The deal with Morocco is that unlike the other countries, Morocco used to have a substantial Jewish population. My first cousin by marriage, her family came from Morocco to Israel. Tens of thousands did it. After the Abraham Accords, Israeli and Moroccan archaeologists have been seeking out ancient Jewish settlements, see what they could find. This is just interesting, and it's good news, if you will. In the Atlas Mountains, deep in the Sahara, they found ancient synagogues. The synagogues had already been robbed by a whole variety of people not worthy of going into it. The communities were abandoned in the 1950s and 1960s. That's when the vast majority of Moroccan Jews moved to Israel, and they didn't move slowly. One might say they fled to Israel, okay? Large numbers. They had to get out of Morocco fast. 1950, 2 years after 1948, you know what was going on, right? So this was not possible. So they had to flee their homes. In 2020 and beyond, the Moroccan-Israeli archaeological teams started looking, and they found a place described as no roof, columns tipping over, walls falling down, and the archaeologists went there. What did they find? They found that right before the Jews fled, they dug a hole in the bima.
Oh, and
in the bima, you know, the platform where people would stand in front of the ark. They dug a hole and they buried there letters, anything on parchment, sacred texts, including Torah scrolls, and lots of amulets and mystical blessings, all shoved into this place. They did the research. This is what they found. They found documents, including letters from rabbis dating from the 17th and 18th centuries, stuck in that hole in the bima. Legal land documents, commercial stuff. And they found a trove of Kabbalistic charms. What's the point? It turns out that this town was the center of Kabbalah in the old Jewish settlement. And they were writing these amulets and sending them all over Morocco. And this was the home. There's not much more to say beyond that, except, wow. Okay,
What year did this happen, Rabbi? When did they dig it all up and find
it
it?
started in 2020.
2020. So it was there since the 40, 48 or 50? Is that what you were saying?
They were shoved into the ground 50, yeah,
In
around
the 50s, yeah.
55, when they all fled. And before they fled, they preserved their records, and now we have them.
That was pretty smart.
Is it okay that I started off with a good news?
No, we like good news. We like good news. Tell us
And of
more.
course, it's going to take a lot of time to figure out what Sukasa mentioned, if you're at all interested, about the Cairo Geniza. If you would please Google it. It's so easy. Google it. Cairo Geniza. And just read how the Jewish understanding of our world was radically changed by what they uncovered that was stored there. Now, those people weren't fleeing. They were there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Things wore out. They put them away. They wouldn't burn them. They wouldn't destroy them, including divorce documents.
Wow.
And we learned about medieval Jewish divorce practices that we had no clue about. It was one of the great researchers was Solomon Schechter, who was one of the great leaders of the conservative movement. And he was closely associated with the Cairo Geniza. I don't want to spend more time on it. I get excited, but it's fun. Steve?
I have one quick question. From what you've described, they found, was it all contemporary? Were they actually making and using these amulets in the mid-20th century?
Up until the time they fled.
Mid-20th century. Wow.
The more we study, Steve, the more we understand. Look, I have right over there on the wall, which you cannot see, a Mizrach, a beautiful piece of art that says Mizrach, which means east. It's on the eastern wall, right over there. And it's more of a Kabbalistic thing than it is a Jewish custom. And you go to the Israel Museum, or you go to the rebuilt Diaspora Museum in Tel Aviv. Steve, Kabbalah, mystical stuff, you bet. You bet. Which, by the way, Steve, in some ways set the stage for people being able to buy into the Shabtai Tzvi, false Messiah phenomenon, because these things were part of us. And those of us, my parents were both born in the old country. They brought with them certain memories of mystical thingies. And it is fascinating. We're going to go on. Okay, they're just fun. I thought we'd enjoy that. The other thing that I'm going to offer to you as fun, the Met Gala was held this past week, in which it was dedicated to Karl Lagerfeld, who is one of the great designers in the world. He is credited, I really know this stuff so well, he is credited with rejuvenating the Chanel name and doing great things. I'm sure this is fascinating to you.
You wouldn't think he was great from the outfits they were wearing, though.
I'm not commenting that many of them showed up in dresses and suits that reflected Lagerfeld's cat. They had a cat outfit. I'm not going to mention that because that would be making fun. I don't want to do that. Now, Lagerfeld is responsible for cleansing the house of Chanel from rampant anti-Semitism. Chanel was infamous for its connections to anti-Semitism. Lagerfeld cleaned house, and that is certainly no longer the case. I could mention that Lagerfeld is an Islamophobe. He hates every Arab he ever met. I could mention that. I could mention that Lagerfeld's mother and father were both active members of the Nazi Party. I'm not going to mention that because why should I cast aspersions? I am going to say this. With all the publicity, I get the New York Times, all the pictures, everything, and yes, the weird outfits. Oh my God. Some of the women actually were not dressed. I mean, I, of course, flipped through that quickly.
Looked through that. I see the way he said
Well,
that. Look through that. Okay.
But they were waiting for Rihanna to show up. She always shows up at the end for the grand entrance. And she was wearing a glorious thing, whatever. But right before she appeared, a cockroach crawled across the red carpet in full view of all the cameras. Now, I'm going to ask you, what's the Jewish content for this conversation with the cockroach on the red carpet at the Met Gala? One reporter said, "We knew that when that cockroach appeared, Franz Kafka was in attendance." Do you remember this powerful, incredibly important story of Gregor Samsa, who woke up one morning and he was a cockroach? The book is Metamorphosis. If you haven't read it, oh, please. I mean, it is a world classic written by Kafka. They looked at the cockroach. Gregor Samsa had come to the gala. And then somebody stepped on the cockroach.
I think it was a photographer.
Okay.
And he got it all over his shoes and he couldn't get it off and he was having a tough time.
Okay, so that's to help you settle into a comfortable current events.
Jesus Christ.
A Hasidic sect in Rockland County, New York, has now officially banned all artificial intelligence programs, specifically Chat GPT, saying that the technology poses a, quote, terrible danger to the Jewish community in Rockland County. So you would want to know that on a religious basis, ultra-Orthodox Jews have now banned artificial intelligence, so we have nothing else to worry about. Do you feel better? Okay.
Do we get to know why they think that?
I'm sorry?
Why do they think it's bad?
Because it's creating fake worlds. And we can only live in the Olam HaEmet, the true world. I don't want to go there. Okay.
I'm sorry, real quick. They've banned it where? They've banned it for members.
They banned it for all of their community in Rockland County, where this sect, this Hasidic sect, is majorly headquartered. Okay, now let's get to the other side of the news. Tomorrow, Thursday, is going to be another day of disruption, official name, Day of Disruption in Israel. The protest movement against the government's overhaul, not just of the judiciary, but a whole range of things, is going to conduct, this is what they're saying, and this is concerning, numerous acts of civil disobedience all across the country. So we're going to be watching for that and for what it means. They are going to try to shut down all of Israel's major interurban highways. This is a serious effort. Why are they doing it now? The fear that the coalition government, we're not going to get to it, since the coalition government is in trouble, I'll get to that. The protest leaders are afraid that to satisfy the ultra-right wing in the government coalition, they're going to push through all these radical changes to pacify the ultra-right wing. The events will be based on the theme of equality. It will be specific in its focus on plans to legislate blanket military service exemptions for ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students and demanding equality for women, LGBTQ community, Arabs, Druze, and other minorities in Israel. What's going on? On Monday, 37 rockets were launched from Gaza into the Negev. The IDF, Israel, the army, Israel Defense Forces. Israel Defense Forces held off for a political moment and then sent jet planes in to bomb certain locations in Gaza. The ultra-right wing, here's our people, Ben Gvir, the ultra-right wing has condemned the Israeli government, of which they are a central part, for a failure to respond vigorously, and are threatening to leave the coalition on the basis of what I would call a wimpy response to the Gaza attacks. Now we go back to what I just said. The protesters against the government plans fear that Netanyahu will throw a bone to the right wing by quickly pushing through some, part, all of these proposed dramatic changes in Israeli civil society. Did I make that clear? How one is going to perhaps bounce against the other. So the threat of Ben Gvir to pull out because of Israel's wimpy response could conceivably lead to a rapid process in the Knesset. And in order to reinvigorate the protest tomorrow, which is really what, it's noon. So it's already night in Israel. In a few hours, the day of disruption will break out all across Israel. Question to that, and then we're going to move on. I see Stacy, I see Michael, I see Sukasa. Okay, Stacy, Michael, Sukasa.
Okay. Rabbi, I recently read, and, assuming this is credible reporting, that Netanyahu had agreed to some of the concerns with respect to the judiciary, and that he was going to be more flexible with respect to, not imposing his will on the judiciary. And I was just wondering if you thought that, or at least from, your reading of it, if that's the case, and or how that factors into, this whole discussion that you're raising about the civil disobedience, et cetera.
Fine question. Let me answer it briefly, then go on to Michael and Sukasa.
Okay.
Are you following the debt discussion debate in Congress right now, the debt ceiling and all that stuff? Every statement that is issued politically and publicly is a lie. Conversation.
Right.
And I don't mean this uncaringly. They're creating an environment, they're shaping a conversation, writing a narrative, whatever they're doing. Do I believe any of them in what they say is their bottom line? No. I'm comfortable with that. I don't fault them. This is the political process. I am going to apply the same answer to, yes, Bibi has indicated an openness to some flexibility. Do I believe him? Unimportant. It's a lie. But he could very well, but it's all posturing, positioning in public while the conversations are going on in the back room. So I have no knowledge. I have no idea where this is going to go. I do know that Bibi is not a man acting out of ideology, acting out of an effort to maintain his political power. That pretty much means everything is for sale. And that's how we got the Speaker of the House. Same thing. Everything for sale. And maybe that's politics. Okay, Michael.
Oh, just real quick, I was wondering, not that I'm advocating for this, but I wonder why Netanyahu wouldn't, in response, undertake a more extensive military response to satisfy the far right. I don't know whether that would draw as much protest on the streets as the judicial package.
That's fair and fine. And when I try to think about it myself, the only thing I came up with is that Bibi has enough international opposition to everything he's doing. Michael, that's me. I didn't read that anywhere, but that he has enough international opposition to everything that he's doing that a strong response, which would be immediately labeled disproportionate, nasty word, a disproportionate response would be met with another cascade of international condemnation. That's, I'm sorry, that's not an answer. That's me. That's just the way I would look at it. Okay, Sukasa.
I just, the comment you made, it seems an oxymoron that the religious right does not serve in the military, and yet they want to have a strong response in Gaza. Can you comment on that?
Do I need to say more than what you said? Yeah,
I mean, is that's the case, huh?
the Haredim are currently pushing for a separate track.
I'm sorry, separate.
Track, T-R-A-C-K, track. What's their issue? They want the IDF exemptions locked in. Does this sound familiar? Before the budget is adopted in May of 2023. It sounds like the United States with a different accent, right? We're not. What's the connection between the IDF exemptions and the budget? Well, you could ask the same thing. What's the connection between paying our bills and you don't want money to go to Medicare? Okay, one is paying bills that we already incurred, and the other is what we should be doing going forward. That's not connected. In the same way, the Haredim said, you don't give us 100% draft exemption, we will not support the budget. We're going to break the coalition. And that's the end of May. Look what's going on right now. I don't wish Bibi a migraine, but there's an awful lot going on because better. Smotrich, the shorter of the two, has attacked Ben-Gvir for threatening to bring down the government. Okay? There's no way to know what happens. And the Haredim also want one other small demand before the May budget. They want the Knesset to set a rule that by a 61-person vote, they can overturn any Supreme Court decision. Folks, that's a catastrophe. I mean, Israel, just between us or among this group, Israel could survive without the Haredim in the army. It's just wrong that they're not. Okay. But you give the Knesset a unicameral body by one vote can overturn any decision of the Supreme Court. You are on your way to a totalitarian government. And that's what they're demanding. So that's on the table too. Okay, now, take a deep breath. A new building is being dedicated in the month of May in Jerusalem. It's called the Museum of Tolerance. The museum took 20 years to build. It is a beautiful structure, though initially they had commissioned Frank Gehry to do it, but all those twisty medical things, I don't know, they didn't like. We like the Disney Center. They didn't like that design. Fine. So they have it. It is a project of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Like there is a Museum of Tolerance here in Los Angeles. Now there is a Museum of Tolerance now in the next 3 weeks functioning in Jerusalem. That the Museum of Tolerance and the Wiesenthal Center, I say with profound respect, has a rightward tendency. They are significantly funded by individuals on the political right. And maybe if you're going to be committed to the Simon Wiesenthal Center and a museum dedicated to the Shoah, you're going to have, okay, a strong representation of conservatives. Not only that, the land purchased for the museum was on top of an old Muslim cemetery. And the effort was to build the Museum of Tolerance on top of a Muslim cemetery. Does that sound a little bit incongruous? Just a little bit? So they eventually, after many lawsuits, moved it off to the side. I've seen, and it's available now in various news feeds, pictures, images of the museum. It's quite modern, quite clean, beautiful. You're going to go into the museum and interact with holograms. They're going to talk to you. They're going to bring you around. And it is also going to be a repository of much data regarding the Shoah and intolerance in general. The Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem, like the Museum of Tolerance here in LA, will not focus only on the afflictions of the Jews. It will focus on racial intolerance, genocide, X, Y, and Z around the world. And that's what it's going to be. It will be an international center of tolerance. So there's may I tell you, this was one of the few building projects in the Jewish world that is fully funded. People came forward. I'm not saying government funded, private funded. People came forward, and the museum exists so that if any of you are planning trips to Israel over the next couple of years, God willing, you got 2 stops that you must make. One is the rebuilt Diaspora Museum in Tel Aviv, which is enormously successful. And the other is the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem. So if you have any occasion, make certain that you hit these places. It's never easy. Next, May 6th. What's happening?
We're recovering from Cinco de Mayo.
Okay, that's worthy. Besides that, it is the coronation of King Charles III and the Queen, Camilla? Something like that.
Queen consort.
Mila.
No, she's no longer Queen Consort. Charles gave her full queenship.
Wow.
She is being crowned as queen.
Wow.
And he as king.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I think it's great. Why shouldn't people spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this and have fun and parties and parades, and then eventually they stand up on the balcony, right, and do the family you don't wave,
Royal wave.
do the royal wave. and you
Royal
do
wave.
that. I think it's terrific. What's interesting is that Charles made a decision to involve Muslim and Jewish clerics in the process.
Oh, that's nice.
It is more than nice. It's appropriate. It's good. He did it. I'm happy. So the chief rabbi of the UK will be in attendance with reserved seating for the coronation.
Hmm.
Wait a second. It's Shabbos.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, David, I mean, you have to know what worries us. It's Shabbos. I know he's spending hundreds of millions, but it's Shabbos. So the chief rabbi is being put up in a royal house immediately adjacent to the cathedral. He is going to have not a roommate, but a house buddy, the president of Israel, Herzog.
Wow.
Herzog and Merbus will be in this building, and perhaps arm in arm on Shabbos, they will walk into the cathedral for the coronation. These are good things in our world.
Very nice. Very nice.
I like it. I got the picture. I think it's neat, but it's a world that is changing. And I have to tell you, I'm glad to receive it. I'm happy. I can make fun of it, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I know that this is being recorded, but I hope it won't be sent up to Los Gatos, California. But over the weekend, I am installing the new rabbi in Los Gatos.
Yeah.
And my opening comments, already written, draw a parallel between the installation of the rabbi and the coronation of a king. And actually, it's quite lighthearted, and I hope they will be able to laugh, even though they don't know me. But it's going to be my last line. My last line is, the House of Windsor was established in 1917. Beit Yisrael, the House of Israel, was established during the Exodus. So we welcome this newcomer into, into the world of power and power. It's just being lighthearted, but that's happening. Now,
Will you record that for us so we can hear it sometime? Your speech?
I don't have the capability.
Oh,
I'm not on my home turf. They may record it. I presume they will. But Doris, I just, I don't want to take a camera and photograph myself with a selfie doing this. So we'll see what they do. Next, the Genesis Prize is given to an outstanding Jewish figure who has contributed to the world. So it's considered to be, quote unquote, the Jewish Nobel Prize. Not really, but it comes with a huge cash gift. The awardee this month is Barbara Streisand.
oh, wow.
And she is being awarded, it said that she's 81 years old.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
How could that be?
She is. She aged like all of
This
us.
kid dressed like a yeshiva bocher. She's this kid. I don't understand it. But in any event, 81 years old. And then it said that she has sold more than 100 million records. Taka. That's a number, right? 100 million records.
Big number.
And she is going to be honored because we know Barbara Streisand. She is involved in Tikkun Olam heavily in making the world a better place in a whole variety of ways. So I'm glad for her. I'm glad for her. Next. What's the rule in the United States regarding conducting foreign policy by political figures outside the country? What's the rule? David. I'm sorry, Michael. I meant
Politics ends at the water's edge.
That's the statement, right, Michael? I mean, that's a famous statement. Politics ends at the water's edge. It's not always observed. So, for example, in Israel, when Bibi was in London, General Gallant attacked the changes that Bibi wanted to make. He's Minister of Defense. Bibi came back, and cleaning up my language, he was mildly perturbed. Okay? They have now kissed and made up. Except today it was revealed that the United States military, standard fashion, has invited the Israeli Minister of Defense to come to the United States for consultations with our top military. This is very important, right? We're talking coordination. And every time Gallant asks Bibi, the prime minister, for permission, that's official, that's normal, to travel to the United States to meet with, the top people in the American military, Bibi has refused. He won't let Gallant go. Now, Gallant is not going to go despite Bibi because they've already had a few things there. So consultations between the Israeli military and the American military are on hold. Bibi obviously harbors resentment against Gallant. Fine. But what else is bugging Bibi? What else? He wants an invitation to come to the White House. And in all of modern history, by this time, the sitting prime minister of Israel, having begun a new term, would have been invited to the White House. President Biden has indicated it's too soon. No, we don't do this, Sukasa. I'm sorry, bad. President Biden has indicated it is too soon for such an invitation because of the United States' active opposition to the changes in the judiciary that Bibi has proposed. What happened this week? What happened this week? David?
I had to go. So Netanyahu was invited by the Speaker of the House to come speak.
McCarthy having won an overwhelming vote to become Speaker of the House on the 15th round of voting, has told Bibi, "You're my man. Informally, we're going to structure this. We're going to bring you to speak to the House of Representatives, even if the president won't invite you to the White House." I'm sorry, Michael, what did you say about politics? What did you say?
Ends at the water's edge.
Yeah. One might assume that McCarthy has significantly overstepped the boundaries of that principle, right?
Didn't he go to Israel to spend time with Bibi just recently? Wasn't he just there?
McCarthy
Yeah.
was in Israel
So he's returning the favor.
with Bibi. And and that's fine. You know, you visit the head of state in his country. He had every right to do that. It's a good. But inviting him to speak to the House when the White House will not invite, let's just say, opens a Pandora's box. And I love this word. It's fraught. It is fraught. It is a difficult thing. We don't know where this is going to go. But I bet that Joe Biden, who doesn't really like McCarthy any more than McCarthy likes Joe Biden, I have a feeling that Joe Biden is also a bit perturbed about this. What a good time to have the president perturbed at the Speaker of the House when they're trying to deal with the debt and the debt limit. If I didn't like you yesterday, boy, do I not like you today. And we have a deadline coming up. We have a deadline coming up. Any thoughts on this political stuff? Please, Michael.
I was just double checking to make sure I was remembering how the Constitution works on this subject. And it is generally accepted to be the prerogative of the executive branch to deal with foreign governments and leaders, not Congress.
Oops, missed that one.
But he's not negotiating, he's inviting a speaker. He can, that's not the same thing. I think he's allowed to do that. Whether it's smart or not is a different story.
All we're pointing out is there may be a constitutional limit. Okay, Michael found that. On the other hand, actually, it's happened once before. It's actually happened once before. It's not a good thing. I remember when other presidents traveled abroad in the middle of political controversy, Republican, Democrat, when other presidents traveled abroad, they left domestic politics at home. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let them come back home and fight it out. Not in Germany, not in Italy, not in France, etc., not in Israel. Okay.
Can I interrupt for 1 second in case Doris didn't see it in the chat? I assume you're going to be at the congregation Shir Hadash, and according to their website, anybody can watch their services live streamed.
Yeah, but don't tell anybody what I'm going to say. Okay,
I
so
don't think Doris is planning on calling anyone up in advance.
okay, thank you. So yeah, it's going to be live stream. All right. And then Michael said, I was thinking about that. A friend of mine, Roberta Grosser, made a documentary called "Who Will Write Our History?"
On the subject of the Warsaw Ghetto, that is.
Got it. And
Mhm.
yes, indeed, Sukasa, in the Warsaw Ghetto, among other things, they buried diaries and documents in milk containers, right? And some of those have been recovered to our, I don't want to say great joy, but very important recovery of materials buried. And it's all part of the Geniza phenomenon. Next. Masada. That strike a bell with anybody?
Sure,
What year did Masada fall?
70,
73. It fell,
73.
Jerusalem fell in, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be picky. Jerusalem fell in 70 CE and Masada fell, 3 years later when the Romans
Yep.
moved everything down to Masada. The Jewish Quarterly Review just published a research document which certified that the Roman army had large numbers of non-Romans in the army. People who were from, other parts of the empire. Including Jews. Yeah, Sukasa, this is opening up a problem. So one might ask, and they are now asking, whether some Jewish soldiers were fighting on the Roman side to conquer Masada. How did they get to that? It looks like Roman records now indicate that provisions were made for non-pork eating, kosher observing Jewish soldiers in the Roman army. They are now able to document this, which means either they could do vegetarian, they could eat other than pork, or that they could keep kosher. The article says with vast understatement, it's an uncomfortable fact, but it illustrates how people are complicated and divided even thousands of years ago. It is possible that thousands of years ago, Jewish soldiers served in the Roman army that destroyed Masada. Steve.
But the Jews at Masada were a fringe group. I mean, I realized they were the last ones and they may have been important, but they also weren't part of the mainstream Jewish community. So it may have been easier for these other Jewish people to not really think of them the way you're implying.
You're totally correct, which is scary, but you're totally correct. The zealots who were on Masada were a fringe militant group that fled Jerusalem to do battle against the Romans for 3 more years out of Masada. This group descended from Masada at times, raided and destroyed neighboring Jewish villages to get food and supplies to bring back up to Masada. So were there Jews who didn't figure the Jews on Masada were our people anyway? It's a thought. It's a thought. David, last comment before we have to close.
Do I remember correctly that the Roman historian Josephus is in fact Jewish? The person who wrote the history of Masada and of that time, then moved to Rome and took another name, but was born a Jew. But I may remember incorrectly.
You remember correctly, Josephus was, and died a Jew. He did not leave. The fact that he wrote a history which one could say played to, some could say pandered to Roman sensibilities, he did. But Josephus's history is a thank God we haven't history. Extremely important. And yeah, he wrote about Masada, and he documented much of that era. Obviously, in 2,000 years ago, not all facts, were clearly available. But yeah, Josephus is proudly one of ours. And like Herodotus, Herodotus wasn't Jewish, but thank God for people like that who were able to give us current windows into the past. Okay, thank you all very much. Wait for tomorrow. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know. And that tomorrow, California time, will be available 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll know. We can only hope for the best. Thank you. We will meet again in 2 weeks for this. And then this Saturday, you're going to have a great.
Thank you so much. This
Thanks,
was great.
Rabbi. Hey, have a good trip.
Thanks, Rabbi.
For an hour north. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.